Hello, and welcome to my no bullshit review of the A7S III. Fuck, damn it. So I just got back from Europe and Jordan about 2 days ago. And while I was in Europe, I was shooting a show and a rogue laser came down and fried my A7S II sensor, so it was rendered unusable and I was very sad. Now unfortunately my sensor got fried when I was about 2-3 days into the tour, and I really needed a camera because I didn't have a backup. So I was forced to buy an A7 III. Forced. When the A7 III was announced, I wasn't too impressed. I thought it was just another upgrade. It didn't really have features that I really wanted or that compelled me to go out and buy it. So I wasn't going to buy it on my own accord. But because it's a cheap camera and it got really good reviews, relatively cheap compared to the A7S II, I decided, why the hell not? I'll buy it. It'll be my new camera since my A7S II is fried, and we'll see how it is. So I spent about a month with it, literally grabbed it, and the next day I had to start shooting with it for work, so I had a really good idea of what this camera can and can't do. So I'm now going to compile that information and get it into a edible, small, bite-sized review for you. So if you're thinking about buying it, you can listen to this and possibly buy it or not buy it depending on what I say. So let's begin. I have my list of things to talk about. So I'm going to break this down into 4 parts. We're going to go with build, photo quality, video quality, and overall for the 4th. So let's just start right now with number 1, build quality. So surprisingly, this is actually a really good build. I really like what they used for the top for the original A7. All they had was like this really cheap plastic on top. For the A7 III, they went with the same kind of material that's on the A7S II on the top, so it feels premium. It doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like you're buying a Alpha series camera that's lower tier. It feels like you're buying a high tier camera. For the grip, I don't really know what they changed. It looks the same as the A7 II. But it feels, I think they made it a little bit wider and it feels good. I really like it. I like the grip actually considerably more than the A7S II. So that being said, the grip is a good thing. Now one thing that they added that I wasn't really sure I would ever need, but once I had it, I discovered that it was actually freaking awesome, is the dual memory card slots. So you might be thinking, oh, I've always used one memory card slot. Why do I need 2? Well, you can program each slot to do different things. If you wanted and you're shooting a show or shooting some type of job and you're doing both video and photo, you can set it to where photos go to one slot and videos go to the other slot, so you're not, cramming all of this data on the one card and putting all of your eggs in one basket. You can also you can make one slot a backup, so it'll copy all of the footage that you're getting onto the second. So if the first card fails, you have the second. It's really up to how you want to use it, but I really like it, and I think that a lot of cameras should have this feature because it's actually awesome. Another thing that they added on the build is the joystick. Again, this was never a feature I thought I'd ever need. I was like, whatever, the wheel's good enough for me. But after using the joystick, it's great. It makes me go through the menus a lot faster and end up using it a lot more than I do the wheel. It's great. I love it. Another thing that they added is the touch screen, although it's kind of like touch screen. I don't know what Sony's deal is. They add new features, but then they just suck at implementing them. So for example, the touch screen, it would be great if you could touch through the menus. You can't. The only thing you can do is touch to focus, which I never do because I just don't trust that type of autofocus. So to me, it's basically useless. This basically doesn't have a touchscreen because I never used that feature and it was so poorly implemented. Shame on you, Sony. You could have done so much more. And last but not least, Sony did something amazing and decided to make a new battery. For comparison, I'll show you. This is the new lithium Z battery that Sony made for the A7 III cameras, and I think also the A7R III. It's amazing. The battery quality is amazing. When I first opened the box, there was only one of these batteries in the box, and I was really worried because I didn't really have the money after dumping all of this money into a new camera to go buy new batteries. But I've only ever needed one for the shows that I was shooting. I never once ran into the issue of having low battery and running out of battery. So that was a good thing. The batteries are amazing. Good job, Sony, because a lot of people didn't like the battery power length on the A7S II. Personally, I didn't think it was that bad in the first place, but this is worlds ahead what that battery could do. All right, part 2, photo quality. Okay, number 1, megapixels. So this has 24.4.2 something megapixels. It's amazing. If you're coming from the A7S II, it's amazing. I can't stress it enough. It's amazing because even though the A7S II has, good photos, it's 12 megapixels. It's just hard. It's hard to work with. I just didn't know how badly I wanted more megapixels until I had more megapixels. It's awesome. You can crop more. You don't lose as much resolution. It's great. You get more data. I love it. Yes. Part two of part two is colors. Sony finally logged onto the internet and looked at what people were saying about their colors and their skin tones and said, oh shit, people don't like our skin tones. We should probably fix that. Well, they actually did. It's still not Canon, okay? Canon has their own voodoo that they're doing for their skin tones. I don't know how they get it so perfect. Sony's close now. They're a lot closer. It's amazing. That's one of the first things I noticed when I started shooting with this camera is the color science is dramatically improved. Your skin tones don't look like The Simpsons anymore. You're not yellow. They have some good pinks, some good reds. They look a lot more natural. I love them. When you buy this camera, if you buy this camera and you start taking photos, you're gonna notice it right away. If you're an avid user of the A7S II, it's amazing. Great job, Sony. They also added a burst. Okay, so you have the A7S II with its burst setting right here. And then you have the A7 III, it's basically like a machine gun. It's insane. I use it all the time. I use it when I'm shooting live event footage because you never know, what you're gonna miss. So the fast rate is great. I love it. It's a good thing. Good job, Sony. Now, in traditional Sony fashion, they dump a lot of great things into a camera and then they take something away that you really liked and they make a dumb decision. And in this case, it is the Play Memories integration. So if you have an A7S II or any other camera around that was from Sony around that time when it was released, you had the Play Memories option in the menu, which allowed you to download apps from Sony's App Store that could be used for photography. So for example, I downloaded a time-lapse app which had an internal intervalometer, which meant that I could set time-lapse times, intervals between the photos and stuff like that, and it would just take it all in camera, and I didn't need to buy one of those external intervalometers. It was great. I used it all the time for time lapses and it was amazing. For some reason, some genius at Sony decided, we don't need it. We don't need it this time. We'll just take it out. So it's no longer there. So now your only option if you want to take time lapses with this camera is to buy an external intervalometer, which really isn't that much money. I mean, if you buy a cheap one, you're between $20 and $30, which is really affordable, but it's just annoying because you got to plug it in. It's just something else you got to carry. If you spend not a lot of money, you're not getting that great, amount of features. It's annoying, but it's just something we have to deal with. Shame on you, Sony. Okay, part three, video quality. This is what a lot of you are probably here for, and here we go. So first things first, colors. Again, Sony did some type of magic and really, really fixed their colors. Now again, they're not on par with the Canon colors. We'll just get that out of the way, but they're close. They're so close. It is amazing. It's one of the first things I noticed as soon as I started shooting, as I said before. It's great and I love it, and thank you Sony for finally listening and fixing whatever gross, disgusting color science you had before. We no longer have to deal with that, but please continue improving because there is still things you can improve upon, but you're doing a great job so far. Two, if you're coming from the A7S II, there on the A7 III, there is 128 frames per second in full HD, and this is actually full HD, it's not cropped, which is amazing, and good job, that's awesome. Next thing, autofocus, it's super fast, it's really good, it's snappy. Some of my lenses aren't compatible. Actually, I only have one autofocus lens and it's not compatible with the highest setting of autofocus that this camera can give. So I can't really judge honestly, and I honestly don't use autofocus that much. So my experience with it is very limited. I'm always pulling focus manually, that's just what I do. So I can't really speak much on this feature, but from what I've seen, it's great. It rarely ever, searches for focus. The only time it does that is if it's really, really dark, which is understandable. It's still not on the par with Canon's dual pixel focus or whatever it's called, but it's there. It's really good, and don't discount it. It's really usable. The 4K footage out of this camera, it does shoot 4K. This isn't, so on the A7S II, it's a 12 megapixel sensor, which means that it's strictly shooting 4K and delivering it at 4K. But since this is a 24 megapixel camera, it's actually capturing 6K and downsampling it into 4K, so you're getting a lot more detail. And if you have these two cameras and you look at comparisons between the 4K, the A7 III is actually considerably sharper, and it just generally looks better because of the color science also. So it's really good. But again, Sony strikes and makes a dumb decision, and I don't know why they decided to do this, but they did. On the A7 III, someone at Sony said, hey, you know the 30 frames per second 4K? Let's add a crop for no reason. Let's just add a crop. I don't know why they did it. It's not like this isn't powerful enough to run 30 frames a second at 4K with no crop. I don't understand it. So now you have like a 1.2 crop when you're shooting 30 frames per second in 4K. I don't understand what the decision is behind that, but shame on you, Sony. Why? Why'd you have to do that? You nearly had a perfect feature, but you just had to take that shit on it. Another thing new that's in this camera that's not in any other camera, as well, it's in a couple other ones, but not in ones that I'd use, is the HDR feature. So when I heard about it when Sony released this camera, I was like, that sounds gimmicky, that sounds like something I'm never gonna use. Whatever, I'm never gonna use it. After doing some research, I was pleasantly surprised to find that the HDR picture profile in this camera is actually really good. And Sony has some examples online where you can look at the differences between S-Log and HDR, and they're really good. I've seen there's one user on YouTube that's really diving into it and trying to see what that picture profile can do, because Sony didn't really explain in any of their documentation what exactly it is. And it's really, really cool what the picture profile can do. Your skin tones are generally a lot better than S-Log, and it's typically a little bit easier to grade because it's already coming out of the camera converted to Rec. 709, so you don't need to do that conversion in post. I'm gonna do more research with it. I haven't really done much with it, but just from my initial test that I did, it looks really good. So I don't really know what to say. Good job yet, Sony? I don't know, but so far, pretty cool. Also, it's my understanding that if you have an HDR compatible TV and you look at this footage, the HDR footage on the TV, it's supposed to look absolutely insane. I don't know. I don't have a TV that does that, so I can't really say anything about it, but apparently that's what I heard. I don't know. Okay, so one of the downfalls of the video quality in this camera is the compression and bitrate. Of course, that's nothing new. We all knew when this camera was announced that it's gonna have 8-bit 420 internal color. If you do have an external recorder, you can get 422, but it's still 8-bit, which is better, but you know, it's still 8-bit. The footage does tend to degrade quickly in post whenever you're coloring it if there's a lot of different light sources and colors. So for example, if you shoot club footage and there's a lot of different flashing lights that are really saturated, really strong, you're gonna notice some clipping, you're gonna notice some just really gross color noise. That's nothing new. We had the same thing with the A7S II. That's just what happens when you have 8-bit and it has, you know, data that it can't interpret. So one of the other things that I noticed with this camera is the compression. So it's shooting at XAVC codec, which is generally a pretty decent codec, but it's shooting 1080p full HD at 50 megabytes per second, and then it shoots 4K at 100. And 100 is generally the lowest, where, like, you know, 4K is still professionally usable. It's like very low. I'm not sure if you get an external recorder, if you can get any more bitrate out of that, but it's something to know. One thing I did notice is that there's occasional really bad compression artifacts in the footage, both 4K and 1080p. For example, the footage will be great, smooth and clear, and then all of a sudden for like a frame or two, it'll look super blocky as if it's like YouTube is compressing it straight out of camera, and then after those 2-3 frames, it jumps back clear. I don't know if it's a glitch or if that's just, you know, a byproduct of the compression. It happens in both 1080p and 4K, which is weird to me because some frames look super clear, uncompressed, amazing footage, and then it just jumps to like 2 or 3 frames of compressed garbage. I'm not sure what's happening behind the scenes. I'm hoping it's a glitch and Sony will just fix it in the next firmware update. I don't know, but we're gonna find out. It's just something to know. And last but not least, number 4, which I'm gonna do graphically instead of on video, final thoughts. So should you upgrade to this camera? Yes, I think you should if you're someone who's looking for your first actual film camera. This is the best of both worlds. You're getting both great photo and video, so it's a great compromise between the two, and you're not losing features on either that you would need. If you're coming from a Canon T5i or a T6i or a Nikon DSLR that you've been using for video to learn the basics of a camera, and now you're ready to take the jump into a professional film camera, I could not recommend this more. If you're someone who has had a A7S II and you're looking for an upgrade and you wasn't sure if this was an upgrade or not, it is an upgrade. It's not something that's going to blow your brains off and be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Why didn't I get this sooner? But it is something that's going to keep you interested, and it's going to have features that are going to pique your interest and are going to be enough to warrant the upgrade. That being said, if you're someone who has a Blackmagic cinema camera or a Canon cinema camera, this is not an upgrade. This would be a considerable downgrade with the 8-bit color and the lack of 60 frames per second at 4K. But it is still a great camera, and if you're in the market for one and you've been eyeballing it, I would say pull the trigger. I was surprised by it, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10 overall. So yeah, hopefully Sony can fix those issues, and hopefully this helped your decision making when purchasing your next camera. Thank you.